I'm making this video in response to the Ricard and James White debate. Now, I noticed something James White didn't want to talk about was, the color of the apostles and the color of Paul. And I'm going to prove right now that the apostles were black and Paul was a black man. And I'm going to use a secondary source because I noticed that James White and the Christian community, they like to use secondary sources. The Bible's not good enough. They need a secondary source. So I'm going to give James White and the Christian community a secondary source. And I'm start with Acts 13:1. Now in the church that was in Antioch, there were certain prophets and teachers, Barnabas and Simeon, who was called Niger. Niger means black. Now I'm going to go to Acts 21, started 37. Then as Paul was about to be led into the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I speak to you?" He replied, "Can you speak Greek? Are you not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a rebellion and led 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness?" But Paul said, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Sicilia, a citizen of no mean city, and I implore you, permit me to speak to the people." So when he had given him permission, Paul stood up on the stairs and motioned with his hand to the people, and when there was great silence, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language. So Paul's mistaken for an Egyptian. Now I'm going to give you my secondary source because James White has to have secondary. Everybody wants secondary sources. Herodotus is known as the father of history. So now I'm going to start at 2. Father of history, Herodotus. Okay, I'm going to start at book 257. Now this is about 2 Egyptian oracles who were in Libya. You can read it yourself. The Dodonians called the woman doves because they were foreigners and seemed to them to make a noise like birds. After a while, the doves spoke with a human voice because the woman whose foreign talk had previously sounded to them like the chatter of a bird, acquired the power to speak what they could understand. For how can it be conceived possible that a dove really could speak with the voice of a man? Lastly, they called the dove black. The Dodonians indicated, lastly, by calling the doves black, the Dodonians indicated that the woman was an Egyptian. Now I'm going to go to 104. There can be no doubt that the Colchians and the Egyptian are an Egyptian race. Before I heard any mention of the fact from others, I had remarked it myself. After the thought had struck me, I made inquiries on the subject both in Colchis and in Egypt, and I found that the Colchians had a more distinct recollection of the Egyptians than the Egyptians had of them, since the Egyptians said that they believed the Colchians to be descendants from the army of Sesostris. My own conjunctions were found first on the fact that they are black-skinned and had woolly hair, which certainly amounts to but little, since several other nations are so too, but further and more especially on the circumstances that the Colchians, the Egyptians, and the Ethiopians are the only nations who practice circumcision from the earliest times. Now this is from Herodotus. Herodotus was there. So this is your secondary source, James White, Herodotus. And you'll probably try to discredit Herodotus now, but that's my secondary source and I'm sticking with it. Thank you.